Hamnet tells the fictional story of William Shakespeare and Agnes Hathaway's courtship and the traumatizing death of their son Hamnet. Rather than portraying art as mere escape, the film argues something more profound, that art can reshape grief and give form to feelings that people struggle to express. The story of Hamnet begins before Shakespeare is an acclaimed playwright and poet. Instead, he's just a Latin tutor named Will who still lives with his parents. But like many of his plays and poems, his story also centers on love. Early in the film, as Will attempts to court Agnes, he admits that speaking with people is sometimes difficult for him. So, Agnes asks Will to tell her a story, something she knows he can do. When he asks what story she would like to hear, she responds,
"Something that moves you."
So, he tells her the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. As the story goes, Orpheus falls in love with the nymph Eurydice, but after their marriage, a snakebite kills her. A grief-stricken Orpheus then journeys to the underworld to reclaim her. After singing a heartbreaking song, Orpheus persuades Hades to return Eurydice. However, Hades allows Orpheus to take Eurydice under one condition, that he doesn't look back at her as he exits the underworld. As they begin their ascent, Orpheus can't hear her footsteps, so he listens and listens and listens. But all he can hear is the sound of his heartbeat, and the rest is silence. And as he approaches the gates of the underworld, he can't contain himself any longer. He turns around to look at her, and she is trapped in the underworld forever. So what should be a story about the extraordinary depths one will go for love, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice emphasizes how love and bravery cannot transcend human weakness. But Agnes doesn't see it this way. She sees Orpheus' mistake as the ultimate sign of love, for he's willing to defy the gods for a glimpse of his beloved. So at their wedding, Agnes tells Will to look at her, which becomes her way of professing her love for him, for she too would defy the gods for him. To be clear, Shakespeare doesn't see Orpheus as a mere fool who dooms his beloved for eternity. In his play Henry VIII, published years after Hamlet, Shakespeare highlights Orpheus' godlike musical abilities. He writes, "Orpheus with his lute made trees and the mountain tops that freeze bow themselves when he did sing. To his music plants and flowers ever sprung, as sun and showers there had made a lasting spring. Everything that heard him play, even the billows of the sea, hung their heads and then lay by, and sweet music is such art, killing care and grief of heart, fall asleep or hearing die." This song highlights how Orpheus' music could nurture plants and flowers and produce lasting spring. More importantly, his music even had the power to alleviate grief. After the son Hamnet dies, Agnes grows cold toward Will because he returns to London so quickly. For Agnes, people should suspend their lives to grieve. Think W.H. Auden's poem Funeral Blues, in which a speaker demands everyone to stop all the clocks, suggesting that even time itself should stop to mourn his loss. But Will believes otherwise. To Agnes, Will is using his art as a means to escape the dread of grief, and this offends her to the point of disgust. On a return home from London, Will gives his family presents. When he gives Agnes a ruby-encrusted bracelet, Jude exalts the ruby as the finest she's ever seen. His daughter Susanna then brags about the house he just bought them. But Agnes places the bracelet on the table and leaves the room. For such things do not matter. So overcome by grief, she can't bring herself to feel joy. Not even Will's showy gift of the biggest house in Stratford. Nothing can alleviate her grief. Something she feels she is suffering alone. But Will does grieve. When Agnes leaves the table, Will follows her to Hamnet's room. Sitting beside her, he admits that he wonders where Hamnet is. He says, "I am constantly wondering where he is or where he has gone. Whatever I'm doing, I'm wondering where is he? I mean, he can't just vanish. All he needs for me is to find him. He must be somewhere. I fear I may run mad with it, even now, a year on." But Agnes couldn't care less. His poetic questioning means little. So she undercuts the depth of his lament and says,
"You is nothing every second, every minute, every day."
Despite his gift for language, his words have no effect on Agnes, so Will apologizes. But she responds, "You're caught by that place in your head. It is now more real to you than anywhere else. Not even the death of our child can keep you from it. Hamlet died a horrible death, and you should have been there. You could have bid him farewell." To Agnes, Will is consumed by his creative pursuits, his work in London. Ironically, though, she's the one who pushed Will to move to London to pursue his writing. Now she's come to loathe his art, his gift for words. So his artful questioning of Hamlet's whereabouts doesn't impress her. What she wants is for Will to stay home and grieve with her, even if it means sacrificing his work. But he doesn't, and she faults him for this. Their conversation ends with Agnes telling Will,
"You should go back to London. It will run just fine without you."
But what she doesn't realize is that grief consumes Will. Time passes, and Agnes thinks Will is in London writing a comedy, and she says this with such spite when her stepmother Joan visits her. But Joan corrects her and says that he's writing a tragedy and hands her a flyer. The title is The Tragedy of Hamlet. In case you didn't watch the film, the opening informs the audience that the names Hamlet and Hamnet were interchangeable. So Agnes and her brother travel to London to see Will and find that he lives in a small apartment, a stark contrast to their large home at Stratford. Since he's not there, they look for him at the theater, right when his play, The Tragedy of Hamlet, begins. It's worth noting that the film does not explain the context of the play, so let me. The Tragedy of Hamlet concerns a prince struggling to avenge his father's death. After Hamlet's father dies, his mother marries his uncle Claudius, who then becomes the new king of Denmark. Soon thereafter, Hamlet learns from his father's ghost that Claudius murdered him. Hamlet vows revenge, but he hesitates for various reasons. All the while, he dwells on the nature of death and the afterlife. In the end, Hamlet finally takes revenge on Claudius, but he winds up dying in the process. I've posted a link to a digital copy of Hamlet for those interested in following along with the rest of my analysis. Also, because Shakespearean English is basically another language, I'm adding a modern English translation of Hamlet alongside the original text. As the play begins, 3 soldiers discuss whether a ghost has appeared. Unsaid is that this ghost is Hamlet's father. Unsurprisingly, Agnes doesn't understand what any of this has to do with Hamlet. Then the ghost appears on stage, and it's played by Will. Then everything changes when one of the actors says Hamlet's name. Agnes becomes livid and then pushes her way to the front of the theater where she screams,
"Don't you dare pronounce my son's name!"
The film then jumps to scene 2 of Act 1 of the play. Here, Claudius, Hamlet's uncle and now stepfather, tells his court that they need to stop grieving his brother, the previous king, and move on. At this point, Agnes argues with her brother to leave, not just because of the reference to her son's name, but because the actor pushes the idea of moving on from grief, an idea that offends her. Then Hamlet appears on stage, and Agnes can't help but gaze at him in awe, her anger all but gone, for she witnesses the embodiment of her son as a man. On stage, Claudius scolds Hamlet for continuing to mourn his father and calls it an unmanly and blasphemous grief. This scene isn't mere fiction. It symbolizes why Will struggles to grieve. He wants to, but society, as represented by Claudius, tells him his grief is for pussies, that he needs to man up and move on, but he can't. So he buries it in his work. The Hamlet of his play is the man he wants to be, free to sit with his emotions, which is the very man Agnes wants him to be. The play transitions to Hamlet's first soliloquy, in which he expresses the agony of grief and the suicidal ideation that pervades the play. And there's Agnes captivated by his every word. And then the ghost appears and recounts how Claudius killed him by pouring poison into his ear as he slept in his orchard. And here, Agnes realizes that Will has been grieving this entire time. Earlier, she had accused Will of being caught in that place, meaning his mind and creative pursuits. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't exactly right either. If you recall, Will struggles to communicate with others, which likely accounts for his seeming inability to grieve. Yet he did. In that place inaccessible to Agnes, Will channels his grief the only way he knows how, through words, through art, what becomes a tragedy of Hamlet. For all these months, Will ran headlong into the underworld of his grief, a place so unbearable he walks along the edge of a pier and recites Hamlet's now famous "to be or not to be" soliloquy, about the existential struggle to continue living in the face of life's unrelenting hardships. This moment reveals the depths of Will's suffering, one that urges him to succumb to his depression and commit that dreadful act. Now on stage, Will embodies his son, and Agnes realizes this. For the best explanation of this scene, let's go to Maggie O'Farrell's book. Hamlet here on this stage is two people, the young man alive and the father dead. He is both alive and dead. Her husband has brought him back to life in the only way he can. As the ghost talks, she sees that her husband, in writing this, in taking the role of the ghost, has changed places with his son. He has taken his son's death and made it his own. He has put himself in death's clutches, resurrecting the boy to his place. Oh horrible, most horrible, murmurs her husband's ghoulish voice, recalling the agony of his death. He has, Agnes sees, done what any father would wish to do, to exchange his child's suffering for his own, to take his place, to offer himself up in his child's stead so that the boy might live. This realization frees Agnes of the anger she felt toward Will. Now she expresses her Orphean desire to look at Will, to rescue him from the underworld of his grief.
Look at me.
Will catches her gaze. They share a moment and reconnect. When Will returns to the scene, he breaks character and utters,
My boy.
which he first said when he saw Hamlet's lifeless body. Here, he's no longer acting as Prince Hamlet's father. He's William Shakespeare, finally bidding farewell to Hamlet. Overcome, Will cries backstage, finally letting out the grief he has pent up for so long. Back on stage, Hamlet duels Laertes. In this scene, Will realizes a dream his son had,
I should be one of the players with a sword.
which brings a smile to Agnes's face. Though Hamlet dies at the end of the play, he dies a noble death. With this, Will provides Agnes and himself with a new image to hold in their memories. Their son as a man, as a hero fighting the evils of the world. As the actor playing Hamlet dies, Agnes reaches out for his hand, which he accepts. Then other spectators reach out for him as Agnes gazes into his eyes. She does not see an actor, but Hamnet, her son. Up until she attends this play, Agnes has been grieving alone. But after Hamlet dies, Agnes realizes the sadness amongst those around her, the grief for Hamlet, and by extension her son. Here, her private suffering becomes a communal act. She is no longer grieving alone. Well, she never was. Agnes then glances at Will, something close to a smirk on her face. The realization that the play has worked for so long was a tribute to her son. At that moment, she sees Hamnet, which makes her smile. He smiles in return and enters the void, a symbolic act that reveals Agnes has finally let him go. Then she laughs. It's not humor she responds to, but the awe of what Will has done for her and Hamnet. She has finally released her pent-up emotions, her resentment of Will. In other words, she, like Will backstage, experiences catharsis. Because of Will, Hamlet will live on as art. Of course, Shakespeare could never know that Hamlet would be revered and read for centuries, but he achieves this, the memorial of his son. In effect, he breathes life back into his son, Agnes, and even himself. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe for more deep dives. Till next time.